A brick street lies open under the morning dust. Voices remain here, but the city has not disappeared. Its drains still run beneath the ground, silent and carefully built, still drop into darkness, lined with ancient baked brick. In the hand of an archaeologist, a small seal waits. Across its surface are signs carved more than 4,000 years ago. Here across the Indus world, again and again. But no one can read them with certainty. This is the strange tension of the Indus Valley Civilization. It left cities, craft, trade, water systems, and thousands of objects. But it did not leave a voice we can clearly hear. There are no royal histories we can read from its own rulers. Inscriptions explaining its gods, laws, wars, or memories. Imperial traces, arranged with a discipline that still unsettles us. So the question is not whether this civilization vanished without evidence. The evidence is everywhere, pressed into brick and buried in dust. It is harder. How do we understand a civilization whose cities survived, but whose words remain locked? Before we ask what the Indus people wrote, we must enter where they live. Across parts of present-day Pakistan and northwest India, their settlements formed a vast urban. A brick street lies open under the morning dust. Its drains still run beneath the ground, silent and carefully built. Hills still drop into darkness, lined with ancient baked brick. In the hand of an archaeologist, a small seal waits. Across its surface are signs carved more than 4,000 years ago. Here across the Indus world, again and again. No one can read them with certainty. This is the strange tension of the Indus Valley Civilization. It left cities, craft, trade, water systems, and thousands of objects. But it did not leave a voice we can clearly hear. There are no royal histories we can read from its own rulers.
Inscriptions explaining its gods, laws, wars, or memories.
Material traces, arranged with a discipline that still unsettles us. So the question is not whether this civilization vanished without evidence. The evidence is everywhere, pressed into brick and buried in dust. It is harder. How do we understand a civilization whose cities survived, but whose words remain locked? Before we ask what the Indus people wrote, we must enter where they lived. Parts of present-day Pakistan and northwest India, their settlements formed a vast urban world. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro became two of its most famous surviving names. But they were not isolated monuments rising alone from the plain. They belonged to a wider pattern of towns, craft centers, fields, routes, and river landscapes. What survives most clearly is not a palace or a royal tomb. Something quieter, and in some ways more revealing. Shaped with remarkable consistency, stacked into walls, platforms, drains, and wells. But thousands of similar bricks across settlements suggest planning, labor, and shared standards. He speaks first through repetition, wall aligns with a street. A street meets another at an angle. Runs beside houses, covered and directed away from daily life. Waste, access, movement, insane. These were not afterthoughts, were built into the structure of the city itself. At Mohenjo-daro, streets and lanes lead past houses with wells and bathing areas. The details are domestic, but the pattern behind them is large. Someone had to make choices about space, water, brick, and maintenance. Yet the evidence does not tell us exactly who made those choices. We should not imagine a crowned king simply because other ancient cities had one. The Indus world does not give us that answer so easily. It gives us order without a readable explanation. A city planned enough to impress us, but silent about its own authority. Silence is not emptiness. Boundary. Archaeology can show the system.
It cannot always name the people who commanded it.
Beyond the streets, the Indus world becomes smaller, closer, and more human. Not in grand inscriptions, but in objects that fit into the hand. Polished smooth. Shaped for use. Shell worked into ornament. A stone weight made with careful precision. A seal carved with an animal, a line of signs, and deliberate skill. These objects pull the civilization out of abstraction. Workshops, hands, routines, choices, and habits repeated across generations. A craftsperson does not need to leave a name to leave evidence of touch. A tool can preserve a decision. Curve of a bead can preserve hours of labor. Of a seal can preserve an act of marking. Many Indus seals are small, but they carry enormous tension. Animals, symbols, and short sequences of signs. Been connected to identity, trade, administration, or ownership. But their exact meanings remain uncertain. This is where the evidence becomes both intimate and frustrating.
We can see that the objects mattered.
They were made carefully and distributed widely. We can trace connections between places through materials and styles. We can even see echoes of exchange with Mesopotamia. But we cannot yet hear the sentence behind the sign. The smallest objects bring us closest to individual lives. And then, at the final inch, they stop speaking. That is why the Indus Valley feels so different from Egypt or Mesopotamia. Other ancient worlds sometimes introduce themselves through kings, monuments, and written claim. This world introduces itself through drains, beads, bricks, seals, and restraints. It does not shout its power from a wall.
Leaves us a system of things.
And asks us to read carefully. The most haunting part of the Indus world is not the absence of signs, presence. signs are there, carved, stamped, repeated, and carried across distance. They appear on seals, tablets, pottery, and other objects. They are not random scratches made without intention. They belong to a system archaeologists and scholars have studied for generations.
But a system is not the same as a readable voice.
Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Indus script has no accepted equivalent of a Rosetta Stone. Bilingual inscription has opened it beyond reasonable doubt. No surviving archive explains the meaning of its short sequences. So every mark carries both information and refusal. Not because the ancient people refused us deliberately. As time removed the key. This is where caution matters most. It is tempting to turn silence into certainty. To say this animal meant one god, this symbol meant one ruler.
A seal into a full story because the image is beautiful.
But beauty is not evidence.
A mark can be real and still remain unread. A symbol can matter deeply without giving us its name. The honest mystery is not that nothing is known. Mystery is that we know so much from the outside, little from the inside.
Measure bricks.
Map streets. We can compare weights.
Study craft, trade, diet, settlement, and environment.
But when the signs appear, the human voice draws back.
Where behind those short inscriptions were names, categories, rules, or beliefs.
They marked ownership.
Perhaps they marked people, places, goods, or offices. Perhaps they did something we have not yet imagined correctly.
The responsible answer is not a dramatic solution.
Discipline to say, we do not yet know.
And in that sentence, the Indus cities become more powerful, not less.
Because they remind us that evidence can survive without surrendering everything.
Text of words, but of movement, water, work, and habit. Imagine a morning inside one of these cities.
As fantasy, and not as a recovered memory.
Only as a careful reconstruction from what the remains allow. A person steps into a narrow street of baked brick.
A neighbor draws water from a well.
A craftsperson handles stone, shell, clay, or metal in a shaded space.
Someone carries goods through a lane worn by repeated feet. Moves through a drain, hidden but essential. Inside houses, courtyards, and rooms suggest rhythms of privacy, labor, and family. None of these people need invented names to feel real. Their lives appear through the spaces that shape them. A drain is not just engineering. Decision about health, order, and the handling of daily waste.
A well is not just architecture.
Repeated act of reaching water in a crowded city.
A bead is not just decoration. It is skill, exchange, desire, and time compressed into a small object.
This is where the Indus Valley becomes deeply human.
Not because we know every belief they held.
The remains show people solving the ordinary problems of living together.
Needed water. They needed streets.
They needed storage, craft, exchange, shelter, and routines.
They built a world where those needs took durable form. And yet, the larger questions remain. Who held authority? How were decisions made?
People fear, honor, remember, or worship.
Tea gives us structure.
Give us touch.
But the inner life of the civilization remains partly beyond the wall. Civilizations do not always end with flames on the horizon. Sometimes they change shape until the old pattern is no longer visible. The Indus cities were not simply erased in one dramatic instant.
This points toward a complex transformation over time.
Changed. Urban centers lost some of their former intensity. Patterns shifted.
Environmental pressures may have played a role.
Rivers, climate stress, trade disruption, and social reorganization are all part of scholarly discussion. But no single cause should be forced into the shape of certainty.
The decline of an urban system can be slower than our imagination wants. A street may grow quieter before it is abandoned. A lane may stop being maintained before it disappears beneath silt. A workshop may change its rhythm before its tools are left behind. They move, adapt, rebuild, or live differently elsewhere.
To call this only a disappearance is too simple. What faded was a particular urban form, a pattern of cities and systems.
Did not vanish like smoke from the plain. Changed, moved, mixed, endured, and left traces in ways harder to isolate. The evidence asks for restraint.
No final day.
No single catastrophe. Long transformation seen through settlement, material culture, and environmental change.
For a cinematic story, this is less convenient.
It is more honest.
Layers.
Must be read slowly. When we return to the ruins, the silence feels different.
At first, it seemed like absence. Now it feels like a form of survival. survived.
Survived. Survived.
Survived.
Even the signs survived, though their meanings remain closed. What did not survive is the voice that would explain them from within. At the center of the Indus Valley. Not that the civilization left too little, but that it left so much we still cannot translate into speech.
It can reveal how people moved.
Reveal how they managed water. It can reveal craft, trade, planning, and daily life.
But it cannot always reveal what they called themselves.
It cannot always return a prayer, a law, a memory, or a name.
So we stand before the Indus world with two truths at once.
It is one of the great urban achievements of the ancient world. And it remains one of its most disciplined silences. Silence of emptiness.
A silence filled with brick, water, craft, and unfinished signs.
Perhaps one day, a discovery will open the script more fully. Until then, the cities continue to speak in the only language they still have. A line of signs no one can yet read. And beneath all of it, the presence of people who built carefully.
Lived beside water, brick, work, trade, and one another, whose world was not silent to them.
To us.
The Indus Valley has not refused to speak. It is still waiting for us to learn how to listen.